Hi, and welcome back to Art Laughs with me, Verity Babs. Today I spoke to Peter Brush. I'm here with Peter. Peter, please introduce yourself.
I'm Peter Brush, and I do comedy like probably every other guest you've had on.
That's the
Okay, yeah.
shtick.
So hi.
And you have picked a Lucian Freud for us today. Where did you first come across this piece? Have you seen it? Why did you pick it?
I think I have seen it, but not for a while. I think it's in the Tate, so I think I have seen it there because I went. I just went there. I don't live in London, so sometimes when I'm in London, I go to an art gallery because if you manage to get the coach or something down, sometimes the early coach is cheaper, so you're there for hours. And so I think I deliberately walked all the way to the Tate. I don't know. I made a beeline because I knew there were some of his paintings there soon after he died, and then this is one I saw for sure that was there, and I thought it wasn't specifically this painting that I was like necessarily after. We just wanted to pick one of his, and this, when I was looking back through them, I sort of thought, oh, this is it's just really interesting. I don't know, like there's a lot of stuff I think that goes over my head, like with art. Like I do walk around art galleries a lot, but a lot of, I think 95% of it, I just sort of like I think you get tired after a bit, don't you? Like after about half an hour, you're like, oh, it's just too much new stuff here, and
I'm in and out in 20 minutes, like regardless of how important the works are. I was walking around with a friend and like walked straight past a Picasso because I just wanted to get out of there, and she was like, but how can you walk past, this is so culturally significant? And it was like, I'm tired, my brain can't take any more.
It's like being full. Like it doesn't matter if you've got gourmet food in front of you. You just don't want to eat anymore. It's not, you don't appreciate the cooking, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what? Picasso deserves me to look at him with more intention, or not at all. I should really enjoy this gourmet food or not have it, rather than have it and be like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing him a service, really, aren't you?
He'll thank me for it later.
Yeah. So, okay. So I just think for a picture of a woman and a cat, like if you said, oh, you're going to look at, do you want to go and see this picture of a woman and a cat? I wouldn't think that I'd be that interested in it. But I think you can look at this for quite a long time because it is the most interesting picture of a woman and a cat.
Yeah, exactly. When you're like, okay, Lucian Freud's Girl with a Kitten, you'll look it up and be like, oh, it's going to be a girl with a kitten. And little do they tell you that you're going to have staring direct eye contact with the cat who is being throttled by the woman.
Yeah, I think what I like about him is that it's like a lot of his pictures are really uncomfortable, but you don't, like, they're not disgusting enough that you sort of recoil at them. You can kind of look at them for a while. Like I don't think it's because you're perversely interested in it. I just think that they're intriguing but unsettling. Do you know what I mean? So this is quite an unsettling picture because she's strangling a cat, but she's also, I don't know if she looks like she's very absent-mindedly strangling the cat. She's not looking at, she's looking into the distance. It's like it's like she's on the verge of some sort of mental break, like she's zoned out or something. Like she really looks like she's on the verge of a mental sort of breakdown or episode or something. That's what it looks like to me. She just doesn't realise that she's forgotten that there's this cat.
It's like absent-mindedly, like she might be watching like Wheel of Fortune while she does it, and that's.
I don't think that's what she's doing.
I think that's what she's doing.
There was a particularly good episode of The Archers was on or something.
You just zone out, and that's the thing as well of like you say with Lucian Freud's characters, or the figures that he paints. A lot of the time as well, when he paints in his more kind of when he paints his nudes and stuff, there's always something a bit like fleshy and like meaty about them that aren't disgusting, like you say. There's nothing like disgusting about this. Whereas if she looked super angry and intentional while she was throttling this cat, that would be a bit like, it would make us want to recoil. Whereas there's something quite just slightly, you've slightly hit both keys on a piano next to each other.
Yeah,
and it's just slightly.
Perfectly. Yeah, that's what I think. He's pitched it like, if that's why I think he's brilliant, because you could so go very slightly wrong in both directions, couldn't you? Like, what it made me think of is I also quite like the author Philip Roth, and I remember watching a documentary about him a few years ago where he sort of talked about how when he writes, he wants to make people feel uncomfortable. He said, he said, if you don't make people feel uncomfortable, what are you doing? Is what he said. Like, and I feel like it feels like the art equivalent of that. Like, I think he's like doing kind of the same thing, like in some ways. Like you're being confronted by something, is how I feel. Because like a lot of them, like, have this sort of psychological edge to them. Like they're just slight. They look like a normal. Like, you know exactly what the picture is of a bloke or something, but everything's just contorted in such a way that it's just slightly confrontational. Like it's
yeah, it feels like everything's like slightly, like the levels of whatever he's doing has been slightly turned up too high for what we consider like normal. So in this, the woman looks slightly too, I don't know, you could say too flat or too like illustrative to be like a real person. Whereas some of his nudes, you know, when you see a hyper, you know, an amazing camera that takes a picture of someone's face and you can see every little like pore and everything, and it makes that reality of it makes them look almost unreal. And there's something about his nudes that are a bit in, like the colors are very intense and he kind of gets every kind of shade different. So yeah, it's almost like the dial is always turned up to 11, and it's not, you know, it's not turned up to 100. It's not disgusting and it's not kind of gross, but it's just at 11 where you're a bit like, ugh.
Yeah, but that's what's perfect about it, is it's just pitched perfectly again, because it makes you uncomfortable, but you can still look at it for quite a long time. And the most boring thing I think he's ever painted was when he did the Queen. So nothing. There's nothing to that. But I guess he probably couldn't do to the Queen what he would have done to Kate Moss or something. Would he?
The Queen holding a cat by the throat.
Or like nude or something. Spread them more. No.
Lucian, okay, before you meet the Queen, we just have to check what you're planning on doing, because we've looked at your work, we love it, but there are certain things that are just not going to run with Liz. You said that you go to galleries now, but was that something you were kind of raised with as well?
I only knew about him when he died, really. I mean, I knew that like his name was in my head somewhere. Like I kind of, if someone said, "Have you heard of him?" I probably would have known, like in the back of my head. You know, like if it was a quiz question, I might be able to drag it up. You know, but I think it was when he died I looked into him. Soon after he died, I was in Newcastle and I went to the Baltic Gallery, and he doesn't have anything in there. But I just looked in the gift shop. There was a big book of all of his things, and I just like sat and looked through that for like an hour, and I don't know, I don't think I'm a connoisseur really. It's quite nerve-wracking talking about art, because I feel like, you know, like you get, I don't know, like I used to have the attitude where like I'd be thinking to myself like, am I interpreting it in the wrong way, or like do I not understand it or something like that? So I'd be it's quite nerve-wracking to sort of talk to someone about it in some ways. Like it would have certainly been some more so years ago, but now I'm a bit more comfortable with saying, yeah, there's something about what he does that just makes me feel like I don't have to articulate it so much, as I know that it's making me feel a certain way that I'm very intrigued. I feel like I can't really express it so much, but it's something about him that strikes me. Like I can walk past 95% of stuff, but if I maybe saw something that he did, I suddenly think, oh, hang on a second. And that happens with, there are a few people like that, you know. I don't know, there's a guy called George Bellows who does loads of pictures of boxers. Have you seen those?
Yeah, they're great.
I saw them at the Royal Academy once, and I was suddenly like, I don't know, it just like woke me up. I was like, wow, these are amazing. They're really brutal, and like, yeah, they're great. Like I would have done one of those probably if you'd have told me that someone had already done this.
I think, and that's kind of the point, right? In the same way that it's the point with music, I guess, because no one ever, if they were like listening to this album, I really felt this, no one would come along and be like, actually, I think you'll find that that's wrong. And art, I think the whole industry is founded upon this idea of like, there are certain people who know about art and they're allowed to know art and they're allowed to talk about art, and everyone else shouldn't bother because they'll be kind of like their opinion is not like valid in this arena. Whereas actually what art is meant to make you feel is something. There's this idea that if you like properly appreciate art, every piece of art you see, you'll be able to find something in that moves you, and it will be like you'll be able to like really appreciate every work of art. Whereas there's plenty of stuff that I am so not fussed about at all, and certain things that are, you know, less, you know, art historically, celebrated, I'll find them really powerful. But sometimes people talk about people like, Michelangelo, and I'm just sort of not fussed. But this idea that, art is something that's kind of almost godly and lofty, and, you ought to respect it, and kind of like religiously, means that if you don't feel like you've got an opinion on everything, or you haven't got a foundation level of knowledge on everything, you sort of feel like you're not allowed to state that opinion, even if that opinion is very like poignant. Like we were saying about like this discord, and there's just something off. That is the valid opinion. You don't need to then say, and while Lucian was, practicing in 1945 with this other artist, like you don't need that information to have that emotion.
I think I'm trying to sort of think about trying to compare it to comedy in some ways. Like, what, you don't like every act, do you?
No.
But
no.
Yeah, far from it actually. But especially when you do it and you're like, like and I guess that must be similar to people that are fully consumed in art, will see art in different ways. To like, there'll be in the same way that there's comedians, there must be artists.
Yeah, really. For sure. And also that thing of like comedians is that even if the script is exactly the same that you say at one gig versus the next, that joke will land differently depending on who is hearing it. And without, some art historian said at some point, I can't remember who it is, or some artist said about, if paintings are just in an empty gallery and no one's looking at them, then they've got no purpose. Jokes without being said aloud have no funniness. And I guess it, in the same way that each painting strikes every individual differently. It's the same with jokes, right?
You'd love to have, this just makes me think, I'd love to like be able to talk to a painting and like see what they felt about their audiences. Like if you had like a girl holding a kitten, if you could talk to the actual painting, and like if they were moved around the country, they'd be like, oh, don't make me play Barnsley again. They don't get it. They just stare at me. They've got no appreciation of it.
I played here in '95. Absolutely bombed.
Yeah. It's great. The idea that like paintings could like complain about the demographics that they're forced to play to in front of them. Like, I did a residency in Munich. It was great. I loved the thing, but I can't go now. So when they're going to sort the visa.
Well, exactly. Like when you have exhibitions that like do tours, at this world tour of this painting, rock and roll.
Do they get a rider? I don't know.
The girl with the kitten is like, bring me more kittens.
Yeah, whiskers or something. I think people worried, and I definitely worried about the pretense of like, but if you do you have to like everything? Do you have to fully understand everything? And I don't think it is even about like technical excellence, or it's just about whether something speaks to you or not. So if you go to the Tate Modern and you like 5% of it, then great, you've enjoyed 5% of stuff. But it doesn't mean, but on a similar token, doesn't mean you have to be disparaging about the stuff that doesn't really speak to you. In the same way that there could be a comedian that's very good, but you're not really that interested in them, But that doesn't mean that you think they're rubbish. It's just not for you, So.
Yeah, exactly. And and the same with music, and the same with anything where you can have a subjective view on it. But the problem is that I suppose art history in its very nature, which is like written by people and then passed down to the next generation who copy from that to get their opinions from art history, or to get their opinions from, the big dealers who are saying who's hot right now, means that even though it's something that is about subjectivity, we're sort of tricked into believing that actually there are objective opinions that you ought to have. Like objectively, Picasso is good. And objectively, if an artist isn't worth over however much, they're not very good. Whereas actually it's all subjective. It's just kind of the system built around it that has made it feel like this is good, this is bad, and that is the right answer.
I think that you need to, it's perhaps about confidence, like because it can make, if you're confronted by that and you feel like you have to it takes a while to, I think as you get older, you tend to get more confident in what you think about stuff anyway, and less blinded by like, oh, you're all supposed to like the classics and stuff, like whether it's films or books or anything. When you get older, I think maybe a little bit more confident saying what you like and what is, and being more comfortable sort of saying, well, actually, this is the thing I like and I don't care so much for that. But again, it's not about saying that stuff you don't like is rubbish. I think that's the thing. Like is Mrs. Brown's Boys rubbish? I mean, it is rubbish, isn't it? But is it really rubbish? You know, like if loads of people laugh at it, is it funny? It's rubbish. But then is there like some comedy that no one's ever laughed at in the world? Then you're probably okay saying that's rubbish, aren't you?
If you don't like something, you say it's rubbish, but then you're aware that, you know, loads and loads of people really like it, then your next step is to have to say, well, those people are rubbish.
Yeah.
Or the idea of going...
I secretly want to do that, but I'm trying not to.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Where can we hear about what you're up to?
Well, I'm on Twitter and Instagram with very slight different handles on there. So Twitter, I'm Peter_Brush, and on Instagram, I'm Peter_Brush_. I do a podcast where I talk to my yoga teacher about mindfulness and meditation and all that, like pretentious stuff. So you might enjoy that. I don't know, but we do that as well, and you can find that through through Twitter and Instagram as well. Like there's these quick links to it and stuff. So if you've got the time, and it's not like there's any other podcasts out there, is there? So.
Thanks for watching. You can follow Peter in the ways written below. As per usual, you can follow me at VerityBabsArt on Instagram, and I'll see you next time.